On a blizzard night in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, a 9-year-old girl held her feverish baby brother close and whispered before a door slammed shut by grown-ups. Just 1 spoon of milk. The wind from Lake Superior roared like a wounded beast, lashing snow across the empty fields in furious swirls. The old Quinn farmhouse stood alone against the white expanse, its sagging roof groaning under the storm. A single bulb flickered weakly in the kitchen window, its light dim, its life nearly as starved as the children within. Inside, Mara Quinn crouched low, her thin body shivering as icy drafts cut through cracks in the walls. She was only 9, but her face already carried the weary lines of someone far older. In her arms, baby Rory, 10 months old, burned with fever. His breath rasped shallow, fragile as a candle flame, each cough threatening to snuff it out. Damp strands of hair clung to his tiny forehead. His lips were pale, trembling. Mara rocked him gently, pressing his small body closer into the torn wool scarf their mother had left behind, the only relic of love since her death in childbirth. On the high kitchen shelf sat a single tin of powdered milk. Mara's eyes returned to it again and again, though hunger clawed at her throat every time. Claudia Voss, their stepmother, had placed it there deliberately, like a crown beyond reach. "For my real child someday," she had sneered, lips curling, her perfume too sweet to mask the bitterness beneath. Bootsteps echoed, sharp, deliberate, striking against the warped floorboards. Mara clutched Rory tighter, her heart hammering. The door swung open, spilling a draft of cold air. Claudia stood framed in the threshold, tall, wrapped in a crimson silk robe, a glass of wine glinting in her hand. Her eyes narrowed at the sound of Rory's whimper. For a heartbeat, silence fell, as though the storm itself waited. Then her voice sliced the air. "Still crying? Pathetic. My own child isn't even born yet, and you two are already draining me like parasites." Mara lifted her chin, though her voice shook. "He's burning with fever. Please, just a little milk." Claudia bent low, her breath heavy with wine, and hissed, "Even strays know how to scavenge. Don't beg me again." She snatched the empty bottle from Mara's trembling hands and hurled it at the tiles. Glass shattered, scattering across the kitchen like cruel stars. Rory whimpered, startled. Mara's arms curved protectively around him. Claudia swirled her wine lazily, then turned on her heel, the echo of her stilettos vanishing down the hall. The door slammed. Darkness returned, heavier than before. Mara sat frozen. A single tear slid down her cheek, falling onto Rory's fevered skin. She wanted to cry aloud, but fear strangled the sound in her throat. Night stretched endless, pressing against her small frame like stone. At last, muffled snores rose from her father's room. Daniel Quinn, once strong, now nothing but a shadow drowned in drink, was lost to the world again. Mara's eyes drifted to his leather wallet left carelessly on the table. Her stomach clenched. Inside, perhaps a bill or two. Her heart thundered. Stealing was wrong, but hunger and death were far worse. She laid Rory gently in the corner, wrapping him tight in the scarf. His tiny chest fluttered with shallow breaths. Mara leaned close, whispering through chattering teeth, "I'll bring milk. Just hold on. Don't leave me." Bare feet padded across the floor, every creak loud as betrayal. Her fingers trembled as she opened the wallet. A crumpled $20 bill slipped free. To most, worthless paper. To her, it was life. She pressed it to her chest, whispering a prayer. But as she turned the lock, harsh light exploded. Claudia stood there, wine glass half empty, eyes gleaming like blades. "So the little thief shows her colors," she hissed. Mara's knees buckled. "He'll die without it. Please, just let me—" The answer came as a slap that rang through the kitchen. Fingers tangled in her hair, dragging her toward the door. Rory wailed, his weak cry slicing the storm. Claudia flung the door wide, and the blizzard howled in. "Get out!" she spat. "Beg the streets for your milk!" Snow swallowed them instantly. Mara stumbled barefoot, Rory pressed tight against her chest. The door slammed shut behind, leaving only the scream of the storm. The cold bit into her skin like knives. Each step sank deep into the drift. Rory whimpered faintly, his fever raging even as the air froze. Mara bent her head close, whispering into the night. "Don't be afraid. I'll find us a place. I promise." Ahead lay nothing but darkness and snow. Yet in her chest, a spark had lit, a defiance that no storm could extinguish. That night, destiny began to turn. Somewhere in the frozen silence, a path was opening, toward the stranger who would change everything. The storm did not end when the door slammed shut behind them. It chased Mara and Rory into the open fields, its claws of snow and wind tearing at their skin. Mara staggered forward barefoot, the icy ground slicing her soles like glass. She had no plan, only the raw instinct to move, to find any shadow or structure that might mean shelter. Rory whimpered weakly against her chest, his fever a burning coal in the heart of winter's cruelty. "Hold on," she whispered into his damp hair, her lips split with cold. "I'll keep you safe." The world was white and endless. Every direction looked the same, waves of drifting snow swallowing fences, barns, and roads. Mara fixed her eyes on a broken line of posts jutting out of the field. Fences meant land, and land might lead her to buildings. She trudged along, her small legs trembling, until a dark outline appeared through the veil of storm, a sagging roof, half collapsed, attached to a squat wooden frame. A stable, abandoned, forgotten. But to Mara, it was salvation. She pushed her shoulder against the frozen door. It groaned, resisted, then gave way with a crack, spilling snow into the dark interior. She ducked inside, shielding Rory as the wind swept past her. The air was still frigid, but at least the gale could no longer claw at their faces. The smell of rot and old hay clung to the air, heavy yet strangely comforting. The floor was scattered with brittle straw, stiff as wire. Mara scraped together a mound in the corner and laid Rory down for a moment. He whimpered, his tiny chest rattling with each breath. Mara quickly pulled her own sweater over him, though it left her arms bare to the cold. She wrapped them both in the tattered wool scarf, drawing his head beneath her chin. "Shh. Mama used to sing when the wind sounded like this," she whispered, rocking him gently. The memory of her mother's lullaby pressed against the silence like a fragile candle flame. "Wind on the roof is not a monster. It's a road home." Her words were thin, her voice raw, but she spoke them anyway, as if language itself could weave warmth. Through the gaps in the roof, flakes of snow sifted down like stars. The storm outside howled, but inside another sound emerged, the slow, steady thump of a broken sign banging against a wall. "Cock! Cock! Cock!" Each strike reminded Mara that time was still passing, that night had not stopped the world entirely. Her fingers searched the straw until they brushed against a coarse burlap sack. She dragged it to the corner, spreading it as a layer between Rory and the ground. She piled straw on top of him, creating a nest, then pulled him close again. His body remained hot against her icy skin. Fever and frost fought a silent war between them. Mara reached into her pocket, heart pounding. Her hand closed around something soft, damp. She pulled it out, a crumpled $20 bill. Somehow, impossibly, it was still there. She had clutched it during Claudia's rage, and the storm had not claimed it. She stared at the wrinkled paper, half-soaked, and felt tears sting her frozen cheeks. "Tomorrow," she breathed, pressing it to her chest. "Tomorrow I'll buy milk, I swear." The oath wrapped itself around her ribs like iron. For days her stepmother had robbed her of choices. But here, under a leaking roof, Mara felt the first stir of defiance. She tied a strand of wool from the scarf around her wrist and Rory's tiny wrist, knotting them together. A thin cord, but stronger than any chain Claudia could forge. "We won't be separated," she vowed, voice trembling. Exhaustion pressed her eyes closed. Her head lolled against the splintered wood. In the haze between waking and sleep, she dreamed of summer, the meadow green, her brother toddling across the grass, their mother's face smiling in sunlight. But then the dream cracked, and Claudia's red silk robe swept across the field, drowning everything in snow. Mara woke with a start to Rory's harsh cough. She held him upright, patting his back. His forehead burned. "Please," she begged the night. "Don't take him!" The storm outside had shifted from rage to weary moaning. Pale gray light seeped through the cracks of the stable. Dawn. Mara sat straighter, teeth clenched. Dawn meant survival. If they had lived this far, they could live one more hour. She fashioned a sling from the burlap sack, tying Rory to her back. He moaned faintly but did not resist. Mara tightened the scarf around them both and braced herself. "We'll find someone," she whispered. "We'll find fire." The stable door screeched open again. The wind had calmed, though the air still bit like knives. The snow outside was smoother, the drifts rounded by night's fury. Mara staggered forward, following the faint tracks of wheels cut into the frozen ground. If wagons had passed here, maybe there was a house. Maybe there were people who would not slam the door in a child's face. Step by step, she trudged. Her feet bled, her breath steamed raggedly. She repeated 3 words like a prayer. Milk, water, warmth. At last, she saw smoke. A thin line rising from a chimney on the horizon. Not a home, too squat, too weathered, but a workshop. She stumbled toward it, vision blurring. At the door, she lifted a trembling hand and knocked. Once. Twice. The third time, her fist slid weakly down the wood. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then footsteps. A bolt scraped. The door creaked open. An old man with hair like snow peered out. His face was lined, his eyes sunken but alert. He saw the girl, the infant strapped to her back, the scarf trailing like a torn banner. His mouth fell open. "God above," he muttered. "Children, in this storm?" Mara could not speak. Her hand opened, and the wet bill fluttered forward. "Milk," she rasped. "Please." The old man's eyes softened. He took the money but pressed it back into her hand. "No. Keep it. Come in." Warm air rolled out as he pulled the door wide. The glow of a wood stove filled the workshop. Mara stumbled inside, clutching Rory. The man draped an old army blanket over them, then poured hot water into a cup. "Drink slow," he said, guiding it to her lips. The warmth scalded, then soothed. She gasped in relief. He found a half-empty tin of oatmeal and a small bottle of milk. He mixed them over the fire, then held a spoon to Rory's lips. The baby stirred, swallowed, then let out a soft whimper. Color returned faintly to his cheeks. Mara pressed her forehead to his, whispering thank yous over and over. The man, Walt, he introduced himself, nodded but said little. He glanced toward the window where dawn painted the snow silver. Then he picked up the phone on his bench, dialing quickly. "Greeley? Walt here? 2 children? Left to die. Bring Dr. Iyer. And Ward. Yes, Alexander Ward. Mara blinked at the unfamiliar name. Who is he? Walt's gaze lingered on her face, pale and determined. He said only, "A man who knows how to keep what others throw away." Rory coughed softly, then fell into a more peaceful sleep. Mara cradled him tighter. For the first time in days, her shoulders eased. There was fire. There was food. There was hope. Outside, the snow was already marked by the dark tracks of an approaching car, and somewhere beyond that horizon, Alexander Ward was waiting to step into their story. The elevator doors slid open with a muted chime. A hallway stretched ahead, white walls glowing with sterile light, floors polished so smooth that every reflection looked like a pale ghost. At the entrance stood a tall man in a dark overcoat, composed but watchful. He didn't rush toward the children. Instead, he lowered himself first, eye level with the bundle in Mara's arms, eyes lingering on the shallow rise and fall of baby Rory's chest. Then his gaze lifted and found Mara's. "Alexander Ward," he said, his voice steady, low. "You must be Mara, and this is Rory. Let's go inside." The word we settled into Mara's bones like warmth. She wasn't used to it. At home, there had only been me and him, her against the world, and Rory against fever. No adult had said we in a long time. Inside, a woman in a white coat was already waiting. Dr. Sahana Iyer pulled on her gloves with sharp precision. Her eyes swept across Rory's flushed skin and labored breaths, and her hand flicked toward the third bed. "Here, quickly." A nurse lifted Rory gently from Mara's arms, as though carrying spun glass. The baby whimpered. Sensors clipped onto his tiny fingers. Machines came alive with beeping pulses. The screen flared with graphs. Oxygen levels, heart rate, shallow waves of breath. "Fever high," Dr. Iyer murmured. "Lungs with dry wheeze, dehydration. Oxygen by nasal cannula, warm fluids, fever management." Orders fell like stones into a pond, rippling out as the nurses moved in practiced rhythm. Tubes slid into place. Warm blankets wrapped around the infant. A soft hiss of oxygen whispered across Rory's cheek. One nurse crouched low, meeting Mara's frightened eyes. "Hold his hand. Just keep holding. We'll do the rest." Mara nodded fiercely. Her small fingers tightened over Rory's tinier ones. The red thread of yarn still bound them wrist to wrist, her desperate invention from the stable. Dr. Iyer glanced at it and did not remove it. Instead, she whispered, "That's good. Here, no one gets left behind." Behind them, Alexander Ward stood a step back, not interfering. He asked only what mattered. "When did he last eat?" "This morning," Mara whispered. "Some watered milk. From a kind man's house." "And the fever? How long?" 2 days. Maybe longer." Ward turned to his aide, Mr. Greeley. "File an immediate intake under humanitarian grounds. All costs charged to the emergency trust. Tell security. If anyone comes demanding them, they see me first." He spoke with quiet iron. Not volume, but weight. The machines beeped steadier now. The graph of Rory's breath grew smoother, less jagged. Mara exhaled, shoulders sagging. For the first time in days, her brother's chest rose with something close to rhythm. "See?" a nurse said softly. "He's finding his way back." Mara let out a sound, half sob, half laugh. She bent over Rory, whispering, "Sleep now. No doors closing here." Dr. Iyer wrote brisk notes, her pen scratching. She didn't probe for stories of smashed bottles or slammed doors. She said only, "We'll need hours of monitoring. Then milk, slowly, by spoon. Basic labs after." Alexander's gaze lingered on Mara. She sat still as stone, eyes locked on her brother. There was no fear in her silence, only a kind of fierce guardianship far too old for her age. "Have you eaten?" he asked. Mara shook her head. "You will," he said simply. He signaled to the staff. A tray arrived, soup steaming, a cup of cocoa warm enough to fog the glass. Mara stared at it as if it might vanish. Alexander lifted a spoon, blew across it, then held it out. "No one here will take food from you. You don't have to hide it." A tiny laugh escaped her, startled by the strangeness of kindness. She reached for the spoon and swallowed. Heat spread down her chest, unfreezing something more than her stomach. Mr. Greeley slipped away to place a call. "Walt." "They made it," he murmured. On the other end, the voice of the carpenter-turned-savior answered, "Keep the lights on for them." "They're on," Greeley replied. Moments later, Alexander guided Mara into a small waiting room adjacent to the ward. Through the glass window, she could still see Rory under the care of nurses. On the walls hung black and white photographs, a newborn's hand curled around an adult's finger, an elderly palm sheltering a child's. On the table sat a single white daisy in a jar, and a note written by hand. "If you are tired, sit." Sitting is also moving forward. Mara did not sit. She stood with her hands pressed to the glass, eyes fixed on Rory. Alexander stood beside her, not towering, not commanding, just there. "You can tell me a little," he said gently. "Only what you want." Her lips trembled. She said almost nothing, just fragments. "Bottle broke. Door slammed. Wind loud." Then she whispered, "He was so hot." Alexander nodded. "I hear you. Tonight we do two things: help him breathe and help you rest." "Tomorrow. The world of locked doors, but not tonight." In the ward, Dr. Iyer bent close to Rory, murmuring as she checked him. "In, out, a little stronger." His numbers climbed, his skin less ashen. A nurse arrived with a spoon and a tiny bottle. Rory swallowed, lips quivering, then sighed, an infant's fragile acceptance of life. Alexander's phone vibrated. He stepped aside, voice crisp. "Noah, I need urgent review of child welfare filings in Marquette County. 2 minors, neglected, endangered. Secure temporary guardianship tonight. File emergency petition tomorrow with medical evidence." He hung up, staring out at the thinning snowfall. Greeley approached quietly. "Sir, security reports a car at the front, licensed to the Quinn farm." Ward's jaw tightened. "Bring them to the lobby. I'll speak to them." Mara stiffened. "They came?" "Perhaps your father," Ward admitted. "If so, I will speak. You stay here. No one will take you if you don't want to go." The lobby echoed with harsh footsteps. Daniel Quinn stumbled in, half sober, half drunk, sweat cutting lines down his face. Beside him, Claudia Voss glided in, tall, wrapped in fur, perfume sharp as knives. Security kept distance but did not yield. Alexander stepped forward. "Good evening." "Where are my children?" Daniel growled. "Who gave you the right?" "They are being treated. They are safe." Claudia's laugh sliced the air. "So this is your game? Playing savior with someone else's blood? You think you can buy them?" Alexander's gaze did not flicker. "Would you like to see medical reports? Vital signs, bruises of varying ages, dehydration markers, all documented." For a moment, Daniel faltered. Claudia's lips thinned, though her eyes still glittered with venom. "They lacked nothing at home," she hissed. "Except an open door," Alexander said. "Except milk unbroken." Her breath caught, stunned by how precisely he struck. "Tonight," Ward continued, voice firm, This place belongs to medicine. Tomorrow, law will speak. If you love them, let the doctors work. Daniel's shoulders sagged. For a fleeting instant, a gentler man flickered in him, then vanished as Claudia's nails dug into his arm. "Come," she snapped. "Tomorrow. Court." They retreated, heels echoing sharp as gunfire. Ward did not watch them leave. He returned to the ward, where Mara's small hands pressed against the glass like leaves. "They're gone," he told her. Her throat worked. "They'll come back. Tomorrow." "Tomorrow we'll have papers," he promised. "Tonight, you sleep." A nurse led Mara to a small resting room near the ward. A bed with white sheets, a lamp with soft shade. Mara hesitated at the threshold. She had never seen a room waiting for her before. Dr. Iyer appeared, offering a small cup. "Warm tea. Helps sleep." She placed a hand gently on the girl's shoulder. "You are not the only guardian tonight. Many of us will not sleep." Mara finally lay down, eyes fixed on the small glass window where Rory's crib glowed faintly under watchful lights. Sleep settled like snow, soft, not heavy, covering jagged edges. Ward returned to stand by Dr. Iyer, watching the monitors. Rory's breaths steadied, numbers rising into safer ranges. Ward whispered, half to himself, "Once, I didn't reach in time." Dr. Iyer didn't ask where. She only said, "Tonight you did." Outside, the storm eased. A single star punctured the clouds, fragile but undeniable. Greeley approached with a folder. "Noah confirms. Papers by morning. Walt sends word. Write their names on the breakfast list." Ward allowed the faintest smile. Already done, when the cocoa was poured. The night carried on in hushed movements, the swish of charts, the hiss of oxygen, the rustle of blankets, and beneath it all a new sound, an infant's soft, steady breathing, like the ticking of a newly wound clock. In the resting room, Mara turned in sleep, fingers still brushing the red yarn. It remained intact, a thread of promise tying her to her brother, tying them both to a dawn waiting beyond the storm. And in the quiet halls of the Ward Biomedical Campus, where light never dimmed, no one slept, not because of duty alone, but because love had entered the building and demanded vigilance. Morning did not arrive gently. It entered the Ward Biomedical Campus like a trial summons, sharp, loud, and official. The storm outside had retreated into pale drifts, but inside, tension pressed harder than any blizzard. Mara awoke with her cheek pressed to a pillow that still felt foreign. For a moment she did not remember where she was, only that Rory's hand was no longer tied to hers. Panic jolted her upright until her eyes found the glass panel. There he was, wrapped in blankets, a nurse bent over him, and Dr. Iyer recording notes. His chest rose steadily, his lips no longer gray. The fear unclenched in her ribs, but not completely. Fear never left at once. A knock at the door. Mr. Greeley stepped in with a tray, porridge, an apple sliced neatly, milk steaming in a small cup. "Breakfast," he said softly. "On the list, just as Walt ordered." Mara blinked. "Walt?" "He sent word last night," Greeley explained. "Said a child can't fight battles on an empty stomach." She touched the cup of milk, and her hands trembled. For 2 days it had been locked behind shelves and cruelty. Now it sat before her, warm and waiting. She sipped, eyes closing as if tasting sunlight. Down the corridor, Alexander Ward stood in his office, phone pressed to his ear. His voice was quiet, but hard. "Yes, Noah. Files ready? Good. We'll meet at Marquette County Courthouse by 10. Emergency petition for guardianship, evidence attached, photos, vitals, Sworn statements. Make sure the judge sees them before the Quinns arrive. He hung up and straightened his tie. The man who had built empires now prepared not for profit, but for custody papers. By mid-morning, black sedans rolled into the courthouse square. Snow crunched under heavy boots. Reporters had gathered, tipped off by whispers of a billionaire, 2 abandoned children, and a stepmother on trial. Cameras snapped as Ward emerged, coat flaring against the wind, Mara walking beside him with Rory bundled in her arms. Dr. Iyer trailed close, ready should fever return. Greeley carried folders thick with evidence. Inside, the courtroom was an oak cathedral. Benches creaked, light slanted across dust motes. At the front sat Judge Harold Kessler, his hair white, his eyes sharp as flint. He struck the gavel once. Case of Quinn minors, emergency custody hearing. Daniel Quinn and Claudia Voss entered together. Daniel's suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. Claudia looked immaculate, her smile brittle, her perfume clouding the air. They sat at the defendant's table, their lawyer leaning close, whispering strategy. The clerk called first witness, Dr. Sahana Iyer. She rose, calm, crisp, and testified to what she had seen: malnutrition, dehydration, fever untreated. This was not a case of poverty, she concluded. This was deliberate withholding of care. Her words carried the clean authority of science. Next came Mr. Greeley, voice unsteady as he confessed what he had long known. I saw bruises. I heard cries. But I was threatened. Told my family would suffer if I spoke. Shame bent his shoulders, but his testimony stood upright. Then the clerk called, Mara Quinn. The room rustled. The 9-year-old girl walked forward, holding her stuffed rabbit, gifted by a nurse that morning. She climbed into the witness chair, her feet not reaching the floor. The clerk asked if she swore to tell the truth. Her small voice, yes. She looked at the microphone, then at the rows of strangers, her throat locked. Then her eyes found Alexander Ward. He gave her the smallest nod, steady, unbreakable. She drew a breath. When Rory was sick, she began, voice shaking, I called my father. I told him Rory couldn't breathe. He said I was annoying. He told me Claudia would handle it. Her lips trembled. But she didn't. She hit me. She locked the milk away. She laughed when we cried. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I begged. I tried to steal money for milk. She caught me. She threw us into the snow. Silence thundered across the room. Claudia's painted smile cracked, her lawyer shifting uneasily. Daniel stared at the floor, hands trembling. The judge leaned forward, voice low but heavy. This court has heard enough. He turned first to Claudia. You are guilty of abuse, neglect, and reckless endangerment. You endangered 2 innocent lives. I sentence you to 5 years imprisonment. Gasps rippled. Claudia shrieked, lunged, but officers restrained her, dragging her from the room as her curses echoed. To Daniel, you abandoned your children. You forfeited the right to call yourself their father. Custody is stripped, effective immediately. Daniel's face crumpled. Whatever protest he tried died on his lips. Finally, the judge looked toward Alexander Ward. Mr. Ward, though unrelated by blood, you have acted with extraordinary courage. Guardianship of Mara and Rory Quinn is granted to you, effective this day. The gavel fell. Reporters erupted, flashbulbs bursting, voices clamored. Mr. Ward, how does it feel to be a hero? But Ward bent only toward Mara. Her eyes were wide, her hand clutching his sleeve like an anchor. So we're safe now? She whispered. Yes, sweetheart, he said softly, Safe. Home. Outside the courthouse, snow gleamed under winter sun. Cameras swarmed, microphones jabbed. Hero billionaire, adoption rumors, a new family born. Ward shielded the children with his coat. He did not raise his voice above the chaos, but when asked if he was a hero, his reply was simple. I am not a hero. I am just a father. The words cut through the frenzy. For Mara, they were more powerful than any verdict. She slid her hand into his, whispering, Then you're ours. That night, back at the estate, the house no longer felt like stone. Rory slept in a crib, breath even, cheeks warm. Mara sat at the dining table, porridge steaming before her. She lifted a spoon but paused, turning first to feed her brother. His lips opened, swallowed, then a sound escaped. Soft, bubbling laughter. Mara froze. Tears blurred her sight. She turned to Ward, who stood silently at the doorway, watching. He nodded once, voice breaking. That is what home should feel like. The estate's long halls, once hollow, now carried a different echo, the fragile, unpracticed music of family. The first days at the Ward estate passed like waking into a dream Mara didn't trust. There was warmth in the walls, food on the table, and no door slammed against her face. Rory's fever broke under Dr. Ayer's watchful care, leaving only a faint cough. He began to babble again, clutching the stuffed rabbit nurses had given him. Mara ate bowls of porridge without fear that someone might snatch them away. Yet every time she laughed, she startled herself, as though joy were a forbidden sound. Alexander Ward gave them space, never hovering, never forcing. He worked quietly at his desk, but always paused when Mara lingered by the door. Each night he walked her to Rory's crib, listening to her whispered lullabies. You don't have to protect him alone anymore, he reminded her. Mara nodded, but her fingers still curled protectively around her brother's wrist. The estate seemed a fortress of calm, marble floors, tall windows catching the winter sun. But peace is never without enemies. It began with a letter. One morning, Greeley found an envelope slipped under the iron gates. No stamp, no sender. He brought it to Alexander, who unfolded it at his desk. Black ink sprawled in jagged strokes. You can't hide them forever. They belong to their blood, not you. Step aside, or pay the price. Ward's jaw tightened. He slid the letter into a drawer, but when he turned, he saw Mara hovering in the doorway. Her eyes had caught the flicker of unease. He forced a smile. Nothing for you to worry about. But Mara's gaze lingered on his clenched fists. That night, she awoke to the crunch of footsteps outside her window. She crept to the glass, breath fogging against the pane. In the moonlit garden, a figure moved, too deliberate to be the wind. A shadow lingered by the hedge, then vanished when the security lights blazed. Her heart hammered. She darted down the corridor, bare feet slapping the floor, and burst into Alexander's study. There's someone outside, she whispered, trembling. Ward strode to the window. Fresh prints scarred the snow, leading toward the trees. His reflection stared back at him, pale, tense, furious. He placed a hand on the glass as though promising it could shield them. By morning, a second sign appeared. At the foot of the gates lay a dead crow, its beak tied shut with twine. Beside it, another note. You stole what was mine. Now I'll take what's yours. Greeley's face went ashen. Dr. Ayer urged caution, but Ward only looked at the children, small and fragile against the vast estate. His voice was low, steady, but his eyes burned. They want a war. Then they'll face me. Mara clutched his hand. Will they come back for us? He knelt before her, his coat brushing the polished floor. "Yes," he admitted. "But this time, they'll find someone waiting." The fragile peace cracked. Shadows gathered at the gates. That evening, the study was lit only by a single desk lamp. Papers sprawled across the wood, legal drafts, Noah Penrose's updates, reports of Jacob Quinn's debts, Claudia's cruelty catalogued. But none of it eased the weight of Mara's fear. Each night she crept from her bed, slipping into Ward's study, clutching Rory in her arms. She refused to sleep unless she saw him awake at his desk. Ward never sent her back. He simply shifted papers aside, clearing a space where she could curl with her brother. Some nights he read aloud, not fairy tales, but scraps from his own childhood journal, words he had never shown anyone. Mara listened, wide-eyed, as if the story of a lonely boy becoming a man who healed others might be her own prophecy too. Then the phone buzzed. An unknown number. One message. "If you want them safe, come alone." Midnight. The old warehouse by the river. Ward's grip tightened around the phone. His first instinct was fury. How dare they threaten children again? But beneath it burned a harder truth. This was a trap. And still, he knew he would walk straight into it. Moments later, Greeley appeared at the doorway. His lined face was taut with worry. "Sir, you can't go. It's too dangerous." Ward slipped the phone into his coat pocket. "I don't have a choice. If they're escalating, it means they're desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. At least take security. They asked for me alone. If I bring guards, they vanish back into the shadows." Ward's tone was firm, cold steel wrapped in calm. Down the hall, Mara's laughter drifted faintly as she tried to soothe Rory with a bedtime story. That fragile sound sealed Ward's resolve. He turned back to Greeley, eyes hard. "I've crossed men far more ruthless than Jacob Quinn. But none of that matters. This isn't about money or power. It's about keeping them safe, and if I must walk into hell, so be it." Midnight loomed. Ward pulled on his dark coat, fastening each button with ritual calm. Each movement was a soldier's preparation. The estate glowed behind him, fragile sanctuary in a storm. His breath fogged in the bitter air. The black car waited. "To the river warehouse," he told the driver. The engine growled to life, cutting through the silence. Somewhere in the darkness, Jacob and Claudia were waiting. And this time, Alexander Ward was ready. The warehouse crouched on the edge of the frozen river like the carcass of an old beast, steel ribs exposed, windows shattered, its skin rusted by decades of snow and neglect. Moonlight traced silver lines across the roof. The wind blew sharp off the water, carrying the metallic tang of ice and old machinery. Alexander Ward stepped from the car into silence. Snow crunched beneath his boots, each step echoing too loudly in the emptiness. He straightened his coat, jaw set, eyes narrowed. The driver looked at him with unspoken fear. "Wait here," Ward said. "If I'm not out in 30 minutes, drive to the campus. Tell Dr. Iyer everything." The man hesitated, then nodded. Ward walked forward, each step deliberate, his breath fogging in the cold. The warehouse door groaned as he pushed it open. Inside, shadows swallowed sound. Water dripped steadily from a broken pipe overhead, a metronome for danger. Two figures emerged from the gloom. Claudia Voss first, silk coat glinting even in the dark, eyes sharp, lips curled in a venomous smile. Beside her, Daniel Quinn, no longer disheveled but cold, composed, as though court defeat had carved out the last of his shame and left only arrogance. "Well, well," Claudia drawled, her heels clicking on the concrete floor. "The mighty Alexander Ward. Come to parade stolen children like trophies?" Ward's voice was quiet, but it carried like iron striking stone. You dare speak of family when you starved them? When you threw them into a storm? Daniel stepped closer, his smirk deepening. You think money makes you their savior? You've known them for days. I am their blood, and blood will always matter more than your checkbook. Ward did not flinch. His eyes burned. Blood does not make you a father. Choice does, and you chose neglect, cruelty, pleasure over duty. That is why they look to me, not you. Claudia laughed, high and brittle. So dramatic. You're just a lonely man trying to buy love. Ward's fists clenched, but his voice never rose. No, I didn't buy them. They chose me. Mara clings to me because she knows I won't raise my hand against her. Rory breathes tonight because I carried him out of the snow. That is what makes me theirs. For the first time, Claudia's smile faltered. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Ward stepped forward, his shadow cutting long across the floor. Send letters. Sneak into my garden. Threaten me with ruin. Do your worst. But hear this. I will never surrender them. Not in this life. Not in the next. The warehouse fell silent except for the steady drip of water. The battle lines had been drawn. Love against cruelty. Protection against possession. Then, without warning, the rear door slammed open. Boots thundered on concrete. Flashlights slashed through the dark. Police officers fanned out, weapons drawn. At their lead stood Noah Penrose, collar turned up, folder thick in his hands. His voice rang like judgment. Claudia Voss, Daniel Quinn, this ends tonight. Claudia's eyes widened, her poise cracking. What is this? Penrose held up the folder, voice sharp as a gavel. Testimonies from neighbors, medical reports from Dr. Iyer, photographs of bruises, sworn statement from Mr. Greeley, every night of hunger, every strike, every scream. It's all here. Officers closed in. Claudia shrieked, thrashing, but two policemen pinned her arms. Daniel roared, but the snap of handcuffs silenced him. The sound echoed like a final verdict through the cavernous space. Ward exhaled, shoulders lowering for the first time in weeks. He did not gloat. His thoughts were already miles away, in a quiet estate where a little girl might be awake, clutching her brother, waiting for him to return. As the officers dragged Claudia and Daniel away, Penrose stepped close, his voice low. They won't touch the children again. The law is on your side now. Ward nodded once, his jaw still tight. It wasn't just the law that saved them. It was a promise. He turned, stepping back into the snow, leaving the warehouse of shadows behind. The night air was bitter, but to him it felt almost warm. He had walked into hell and walked out carrying something greater than victory. Certainty. Behind him, the river whispered beneath its crust of ice. Ahead, lights glowed faint on the horizon. Home. And in that home, two children would wake to a dawn where doors no longer slammed, where milk was not locked away, where love was no longer a stranger, but a guardian. The courthouse smelled of old wood and colder justice. Its oak beams arched overhead like the ribs of a stern ship, carrying everyone inside toward a verdict none could escape. Mara Quinn sat on a bench too large for her, her legs dangling above the marble floor. She clutched Rory's stuffed rabbit, its ear frayed, its belly patched. The soft toy was the only thing that didn't feel like it belonged to strangers. Alexander Ward sat beside her, a steady silhouette in his dark suit. His hand didn't press or hover, only rested open on the bench between them, an anchor she could grip if the tide rose too high. The bailiff's voice cut through the air. Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Harold Kessler presiding. The gavel struck. All stood. Then all eyes turned toward the two figures seated at the defense table. Daniel Quinn, unkempt, red-eyed, trembling with some mixture of rage and regret. Beside him, Claudia Voss, polished, poised, her mouth frozen into the blade of a smile. The trial had begun. Noah Penrose rose first, presenting his case with calm gravity. He laid before the court photographs, bruises mapped like continents across small bodies. He read from Dr. Ayer's report, each line a quiet dagger: malnutrition, untreated fever, signs of trauma. He summoned Mr. Greeley, who confessed what he had seen but feared to speak of. Locked doors, cries ignored, laughter at suffering. Each word dropped like a stone into the still water of the room. Then came the moment Mara feared most. The clerk called, "Mara Quinn, please take the stand." The world tilted. Her feet carried her forward, though her chest begged her to stop. She climbed into the witness chair, the microphone looming like a steel flower. The clerk bent low, voice gentler than expected. "Do you swear to tell the truth?" Her voice cracked. "Yes." Judge Kessler leaned forward, eyes kind behind the sternness. "Take your time, child." She gripped the rabbit tighter. For a long moment she said nothing, just stared at the grain of the wood beneath her shoes. Then, as if something unlatched inside her, the words came. "Rory was sick," she whispered. "I begged for help. I told my father. He told me I was annoying." Claudia laughed. She locked the milk away. When I cried, she hit me. Her lips trembled, but she pressed on. "I tried to steal money for milk. She caught me. She threw us into the snow." The courtroom went utterly still. Even the pens of reporters hesitated. Mara's tears streaked silently, but her voice didn't falter. "We would have died. But Mr. Ward found us. He carried us. He kept us warm. He stayed." She turned then, eyes finding Alexander. "He didn't close the door." Ward's jaw tightened, his eyes bright with unshed fire. Across the courtroom, Claudia shifted in her seat, mask cracking. Daniel's head fell into his hands, his shoulders shaking. Noah Penrose's voice broke the silence. "Thank you, Mara. That is all." When she stepped down, she felt lighter, as if the weight she had carried through storms and locked doors had finally been set down before the world. The defense tried to protest, Claudia hissing about fabrications, Daniel mumbling excuses, but their words fell hollow against the thunder of truth. At last, Judge Kessler lifted his gavel. His voice, rough with age but steady as stone, filled the chamber. "Claudia Voss, guilty of abuse, neglect, endangerment, sentence, 5 years imprisonment." Claudia shrieked, her fury echoing, but 2 bailiffs seized her arms. "Daniel Quinn, guilty of abandonment. Custody terminated, effective immediately." Daniel sagged, a man undone, his eyes empty as he was led away. Then the judge turned to Alexander Ward. "Mr. Ward, though no blood ties bind you, your actions speak of fatherhood. Guardianship of Mara and Rory Quinn is granted to you, this day forward." The gavel struck like the final toll of a bell. Reporters erupted. Cameras flashed. Voices shouted questions. But Ward bent only toward Mara, lowering himself to her height. "Do you understand, sweetheart? You're safe now. No one can take you." Her eyes shone with something unfamiliar, relief without fear. She whispered, "Then you're really ours?" His voice caught. "Yes, if you'll have me." She slid her small hand into his, whispering back, "We already did." Outside, the courthouse steps blazed with flashbulbs. "Hero billionaire! Adoption rumors!" the reporters cried. Ward shielded the children with his coat, ignoring the frenzy. One question pierced the clamor. "Are you a hero?" He answered, voice clear but humble. "No, I am not a hero. I am just a father." The words cut deeper than headlines ever could, and in Mara's heart, they became scripture. That night, when the estate lights glowed warm against the snow, Rory slept soundly in his crib, breath steady, cheeks pink. Mara sat at the long dining table with Ward. Before her was a bowl of porridge, steam curling upward. She lifted the spoon, then paused, turning first to feed her brother. He swallowed, then giggled, a bright, bubbling laugh that broke the last of winter's hold on the house. Ward's eyes filled, though he turned his face away. "That," he said softly, "is what home should feel like." And for the first time in years, Mara believed him. The snow still lingered in patches across the Vermont hills, though the worst of winter had passed. The Ward estate, once a monument of stone and silence, now breathed with softer rhythms. Fires crackled in the hearth. Footsteps, small and unhurried, echoed through its halls. For the first time in decades, the house was not simply lived in. It was alive. Mara Quinn awoke early that morning, not to Claudia's shrill commands or the gnaw of hunger, but to the faint cooing of her baby brother in the nursery next door. She patted across the polished floorboards, Rory's stuffed rabbit clutched in one hand. The door creaked softly as she pushed it open. Rory lay in the crib Alexander had prepared, his cheeks flushed with health, his fists curling and uncurling as he babbled nonsense into the morning light. Mara leaned against the railing, her eyes soft. For the first time in months, maybe years, his laughter rang unbroken by coughs or cries. "You're safe," she whispered, pressing the rabbit against his chest. "We're safe." Behind her, a low voice answered, "And you always will be." She turned. Alexander Ward stood at the doorway, still in his dressing robe, hair flecked with silver. His face, usually unreadable in boardrooms, softened when his gaze fell on the children. Mara studied him, then whispered the question that had haunted her even in safety. "You won't leave like he did, will you?" Ward stepped forward, kneeling so his eyes met hers. "No, Mara. I'm not going anywhere. My world is here now, with you and Rory." The words settled over her like a blanket, fragile but warm. She nodded, clutching the crib railing until her knuckles whitened, as if testing whether his promise would hold. The days that followed unfolded with a rhythm Mara barely recognized. Meals appeared on time, warm and plentiful. Attawell, Ward's longtime butler, no longer moved through the halls stiff with formality. Instead, he carried trays of bread and milk with a gentleness Mara never expected from a man who once seemed carved of marble. He even allowed Rory to tug at his cufflinks, smiling faintly as the infant babbled. Dr. Anika Iyer visited often, her sharp eyes softening each time she checked Rory's heartbeat or examined the fading bruises along Mara's arms. "He's recovering well," she told Ward one evening, while Mara hovered near the study's doorway. "But she," Dr. Iyer nodded toward Mara, "she carries wounds that time alone cannot heal." Ward's gaze drifted to the girl, who stood clutching a book she couldn't yet read. "Then time won't be the only healer," he said quietly. "I'll see to that." It began with small acts. He sat with Mara at the long oak table, teaching her how to hold a pencil properly, how to form letters. At first, her hands shook, the memory of ridicule louder than any encouragement, but Ward's patience never wavered. "Mistakes aren't failures," he told her. "They're footprints, proof you're moving forward." Soon, the pages filled with shaky but determined words. Rory laughed today. Mr. Ward helped me read the word home. She guarded those notebooks like treasure, hiding them under her pillow at night. One afternoon, Ward led her to the library, a cavern of books that had once been for display rather than use. Dust motes spun in the golden light. He gestured toward the shelves. "These are yours as much as mine. Any story you want, you can take." Mara's eyes widened. She reached hesitantly, pulling down a worn copy of The Secret Garden. The irony was not lost on Ward. The tale of a child finding life again in hidden soil, mirrored here in the quiet rebirth of this house. Rory thrived as well. His fevers faded. His appetite grew, and his giggles filled the corridors. Mara often sat with him on the carpet of the drawing room, stacking wooden blocks while Ward pretended to be too clumsy to balance even one. Mara laughed then, not cautiously but freely, the sound startling even herself. Attewell, once so restrained, surprised them all when he crouched to help Rory build a tower higher than his own knee. The sight of the butler, gray hair bent over wooden blocks, made Mara giggle until her sides ached. But healing is never without shadows. One evening, while setting the table, Mara froze at the sound of footsteps behind her, heavy, deliberate, too much like Daniel's. Her hands shook, the plate slipping and shattering on the floor. She pressed herself against the wall, eyes wide. Ward rushed in at the sound, his face tightening at the sight of her trembling. He crouched, speaking softly. "Mara, it's just me. Only me." It took long minutes for her breath to steady. He swept the shards away himself, refusing to let her touch them. "No glass," he murmured. "Not for your hands." That night, when she asked in a whisper, "What if they come back?" he answered with a steel edge she had never heard before. "Then they'll find me waiting. And I promise you, they will never hurt you again." His words did not erase the fear, but they planted something stronger. Trust. As spring crept over Vermont, the estate changed with the season. The garden, once bare, filled with early blossoms. Mara would run her fingers across the petals, whispering their names as Ward taught them to her. Daffodil, tulip, crocus. She giggled when Rory grabbed a petal and tried to eat it, his toothless grin lighting the day. In the evenings after the children slept, Ward often stood at the window of his study, staring out at the hills. For years he had built empires, chasing numbers and acquisitions. But now, watching a girl sleep peacefully for the first time in her life, he realized the greatest empire he would ever build had nothing to do with money. The first true laugh came weeks later. Mara had been helping Attewell in the kitchen, her hands clumsy but eager. She spilled flour across the counter, her cheeks burning with shame. She braced herself for anger. Instead, Attewell sneezed, his nose powdered white, and Ward, entering at just that moment, broke into laughter so deep it startled them both. Mara stared, wide-eyed, then giggled, covering her mouth. For the first time, laughter did not feel dangerous. It felt like permission. It felt like home. That night in her notebook, she wrote in careful letters, "Dad kept his promise today." I wasn't afraid. Ward found the notebook days later, left open on the table. His chest tightened as he traced the words. He didn't correct her use of Dad. He only closed the book gently, reverently, as though it were scripture. The house that once echoed with silence now carried new sounds. Mara's pen scratching paper, Rory's babbles, Ottewell's quiet humming, Dr. Ayer's steady counsel, and above all, laughter. For the first time in years, Alexander Ward sat by the fire and did not feel the weight of emptiness pressing in. Instead, he felt the warmth of belonging. And Mara, lying awake in her bed, whispered to herself into the darkness, "Home." The word no longer felt like a dream. It felt real. The Vermont spring brought longer days, softer winds, and the green unfurling of leaves across the Ward estate. From the outside, the great house seemed unshakable, its stone walls glowing golden in the morning light. But inside, beneath the laughter that now drifted through its halls, Alexander Ward could sense a tension, like the faint vibration of a string stretched too tight. He wasn't wrong. It began with the letter. Attawell found it at dawn, slipped under the iron gates. No stamp, no sender. Just black ink scrawled across thick paper. You can't hide them forever. Blood will claim what it owns. Ward read the words twice, then folded the letter neatly and placed it in his desk drawer. But Mara, standing in the doorway with Rory balanced on her hip, caught the flicker of unease in his eyes. She said nothing. Still, she noticed how he lingered by the windows more often, how the security lights blazed longer into the night. 2 evenings later, Mara awoke to the sound of footsteps crunching in the garden below her window. At first, she told herself it was Attawell making his rounds, but the figure she glimpsed in the moonlight moved differently, too swift, too deliberate. Her breath hitched. She pressed Rory's rabbit against her chest and ran barefoot down the corridor. Ward was in his study, lamp still burning. She burst through the door. "There's someone outside!" He was on his feet instantly, coat swirling as he strode to the window. The snow-dampened ground bore prints, fresh, leading toward the hedges. But the intruder had vanished. Ward pressed a hand against the cold glass, his reflection pale with worry. "Go back to bed, Mara," he said gently. "I'll take care of this." But she didn't move. "They're coming back, aren't they?" He turned, his eyes steady, fierce. "Yes. And this time, they'll find me waiting." The next morning, the threat grew darker. At the base of the gates lay a dead crow, its beak bound with twine. Beside it, another note. "You stole what was mine. Now I'll take what's yours." Attawell's face went ashen when he saw it. Dr. Iyer urged caution, warning that these were no idle threats. But Ward only looked toward the children, Mara clutching Rory close, and his voice hardened like steel. "They want a war," he said. "Then they will face me." Days turned into weeks, each carrying new signs of shadow. The engine of the car tampered with. A window left ajar, though no one remembered opening it. Strange calls at midnight that ended in silence. Mara grew restless, her laughter faltering. She began to sleep with her shoes still on, as if ready to run at the sound of breaking glass. One night, when Ward found her curled on the rug beside Rory's crib, he knelt and pulled a blanket over her small frame. "You don't have to keep watch anymore," he whispered. "That's my job now." Her eyes opened, wide and solemn. "But what if they take us back?" He cupped her cheek, the way a father might. "Then they will have to go through me. And I promise you, Mara, they never will." Then the phone rang. It was nearly midnight when the call came, the line crackling with static. Ward answered, his voice clipped. "If you want them safe," the voice rasped, low and cold, "come alone. Midnight. The warehouse by the river." The line went dead. Ward's first instinct was fury. He wanted to summon security, to flood the estate with guards and lights. But he knew the truth. If he brought an army, the cowards would vanish again, waiting for another chance. He set the receiver down, his hand trembling only slightly. He would go. Attawell appeared in the doorway, his face drawn. "Sir, you can't. It's too dangerous." Ward slipped the folded note from his pocket, sliding it across the desk. "I don't have a choice. At least take men with you." "No," Ward said, his tone final. "They asked for me alone. If I bring guards, they'll disappear back into the dark." This ends tonight. From down the hall, Mara's voice carried faintly, reading aloud to Rory from the secret garden. That fragile sound was enough to seal his resolve. He looked back at Attewell, his jaw hard. I built empires. I've crossed men twice as ruthless as Jacob Quinn, but this... His voice cracked. This is not about power. It's about keeping them safe. And if I must walk into hell to do it, then I will. Midnight loomed. Ward dressed with deliberate calm, fastening each button of his dark coat as if preparing for battle. The black car waited at the gates, its engine purring against the silence. He stepped inside, his face carved with resolve. To the river warehouse, he told the driver. The tires hissed against the wet road as the car cut through the night. Shadows blurred past, but Ward's thoughts were steady, of Mara's trembling hand in his, of Rory's laugh echoing through the halls, of the vow he had made to both. You will never go back. The warehouse loomed like a carcass of rust and shadow, its windows glowing faintly under the pale moon. Snow crunched beneath Ward's boots as he stepped inside. The air smelled of oil and iron, the drip of water echoing through the vast space. Then, from the far end, voices. Two figures emerged from the dark. Claudia, her silk coat clinging to her like a serpent's skin, her eyes glittering with venom, and Daniel, his smirk cold, his hands buried in his coat pockets as though this were merely another deal to be struck. Well, Claudia purred. The mighty Alexander Ward. Did you really think you could steal my family and parade them as your charity project? Ward's gaze hardened. Family. You starved them. You beat them. You threw them into the snow. That is not family. That is cruelty. Daniel stepped forward, his smirk deepening. You think money makes you their savior? You've known them a few weeks. I am their blood. That will always matter more than your checkbook. Ward didn't flinch. His voice was calm, unyielding. Blood doesn't make a father. Choice does. And you chose yourself over them every single time. Claudia's laugh rang sharp, hollow. So dramatic. You think you're some hero? You're just a lonely man trying to buy love that isn't yours. Ward's fists clenched, but his voice remained steady. No. They chose me. Mara clings to me because she knows I will never raise my hand against her. Rory breathes tonight because I carried him from the snow. That is what makes me theirs. For the first time, Claudia's smile faltered. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Ward took another step forward, his shadow slicing across the cracked floor. You can send letters. You can stalk my garden. You can threaten me with ruin. But hear me well. I will never surrender them. Not in this life. Not in the next. The warehouse fell silent but for the drip of water, echoing like a countdown. And in that silence, the battle lines were drawn, not of wealth or power, but of love against cruelty. A father's vow against two predators, clinging to the last threads of control. The storm had come at last. The warehouse dripped with the sound of leaking pipes, each drop echoing like a drumbeat of fate. Alexander Ward stood alone in the center of the concrete floor, facing Claudia Voss and Daniel Quinn, their silhouettes sharp against the fractured moonlight. Claudia's voice cut through the silence. You've made a grave mistake, Alexander. Do you think you can rewrite bloodlines with your charity? Those children belong to us. Ward's reply was steady, his words ringing like tempered steel. You forfeited your claim the moment you starved them, the moment you chose cruelty over care. Family isn't forged by blood. It's forged by love, and you never gave them any. Daniel sneered, stepping closer. You have money, yes, Influence, maybe. But I have the law. The courts won't side with a stranger against their own father. Ward did not move. His breath fogged in the cold air. Then let the law decide. The warehouse doors exploded open. Boots thundered against the concrete as a squad of officers surged inside, flashlights slicing through the gloom. At their lead was Fenton Calloway, his coat collar turned up against the cold, his presence sharp and commanding. In his hand was a thick folder stuffed with papers, photographs, sworn affidavits. His voice carried like a verdict. Claudia Voss, Daniel Quinn. This ends tonight. Claudia faltered, her smile cracking. What is this? Fenton lifted the folder high. Testimonies from neighbors, medical reports from Dr. Iyer, photographs of bruises, Attewell's sworn statement. Every strike, every night those children were left hungry. It's all here. The officers fanned out. Their weapons gleamed in the dim light. Claudia stumbled backward, silk dragging against the dirty floor. Lies! He put you up to this. He wants to steal them. But Daniel's mask shattered differently. Rage surged through his features. You dare? He spat at Ward. You dare steal what's mine? Ward stepped forward, voice low, unshakable. You lost them the moment you turned your back. They were never yours. The officers closed in. Claudia shrieked, thrashing as two men pinned her arms. Daniel resisted until the cold bite of handcuffs snapped around his wrists. His fury echoed through the cavern, hollow as the broken windows. Fenton's voice rang out. By order of the court, both of you are under arrest for child abuse, neglect, and endangerment. You won't escape this. Ward exhaled, his shoulders loosening for the first time in weeks. But there was no triumph in his eyes. Only the memory of a little girl shivering in snow, a baby burning with fever. This was not victory. This was justice. The courtroom was a cathedral of judgment. Oak benches groaned under the weight of reporters, their pens scratching furiously as cameras flashed whenever Daniel or Claudia were led inside in shackles. At the front sat Judge Harold Kessler, his gaze heavy with sorrow more than anger. Call the witness, he commanded. And so Mara Quinn, small in her simple dress, clutching Rory's rabbit, was asked to take the stand. She walked slowly, her steps uncertain, her eyes darting to the sea of strangers. But then she found Ward's gaze, steady, calm, unwavering, and her breath steadied. The clerk bent down. Do you swear to tell the truth? Her voice trembled but did not break. Yes. She sat, feet not reaching the floor. Rabbit clutched tight. For a moment the silence nearly crushed her. Then she spoke, her words quiet but slicing through the air like a bell. When Rory was sick, I called my dad, Daniel. I told him Rory couldn't breathe. He said I was annoying. He told me Claudia would handle it. Her voice quivered. But she didn't. She hit me. She locked the milk away. She laughed while Rory cried. I begged her. She broke the bottle and told me to watch him die. Gasps rippled across the courtroom. Claudia's face twisted with fury, Daniel's mask of arrogance crumbling. Mara's tears streaked down her cheeks, but she kept going. I tried everything. I tried to save him, but I was just a little girl. Silence followed, heavy and merciless. Even the reporters' pens hesitated. Ward's chest burned with pride and grief. He did not see a victim at that stand. He saw a warrior. Judge Kessler's gavel struck. Enough! His voice was stern, but sorrow laced through it. The verdict fell like thunder. Claudia Voss, guilty of child abuse, neglect, and reckless endangerment. Sentence, 5 years imprisonment. Claudia shrieked as officers dragged her away, heels scraping against the wooden floor. Daniel Quinn, guilty of abandonment. All custodial rights terminated effective immediately. Daniel slumped, pale and silent, his threats silenced once and for all. Then the judge turned to Ward. His voice softened. Mr. Ward, though no bond of blood ties you, your actions speak of fatherhood. Guardianship of Mara and Rory Quinn is formally granted to you. The gavel fell. The courtroom erupted, flashes of cameras, whispers of hero, savior, guardian. But Ward bent only toward Mara, kneeling so his eyes met hers. Do you understand, sweetheart? You're safe now. No one can take you away. Her lips trembled. Then you're really ours? His voice cracked. If you'll have me. She pressed her forehead against his chest, whispering through tears. We already did. The courthouse steps boiled with reporters. Questions flew like arrows. How does it feel to be a hero? Do you plan to adopt? Was this charity or love? Ward shielded the children with his coat, guiding them through the frenzy. One question pierced the chaos. Mr. Ward, are you a hero? He stopped, his voice deep, steady, final. No, I am not a hero. I am just a father. The crowd fell silent. Mara's hand slid into his, squeezing tight. Back at the estate, quiet replaced the clamor. Attewell had prepared a warm crib, soft blankets, gentle lamplight. Rory stirred, his lips parting in a faint laugh as he drifted into easy sleep. Mara hovered at the door, uncertain, until Ward beckoned her closer. Do you want to help tuck him in? She nodded, pulling the blanket over her brother's chest. For the first time, she performed the act not out of fear or desperation, but safety. Ward crouched beside her. You don't have to protect him alone anymore. You have me now. She blinked through tears. Do you really mean it? Every word. She leaned into his arm. Then you're not just a father. You're our father. Years later, the estate no longer echoed with emptiness. Its halls rang with laughter, the scuff of shoes, the quiet hum of lullabies. At 18, Mara stood at her window, gazing at the hills. On her desk lay a notebook, pages yellowed with age. She opened it. In her shaky 9-year-old handwriting, Dad kept his promise. I will never be afraid again. Her lips curved into a trembling smile. She whispered, just one promise, and it saved us. Downstairs, Ward waited by the door, silver now threading his hair. Rory's laughter drifted from the garden, Attewell chasing him with surprising speed for his years. Dr. Iyer called after them, laughter lacing her voice. Mara slipped her hand into Ward's. This will always be our home. His eyes glistened. Always. Forever. Together they stepped into the fading light. A family forged not by blood but by choice, by love, by a promise unbroken. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, the house seemed to whisper back what Mara had once only dreamed. Home.